The Hill recently spoke with prominent Democratic Party officials and insiders in order to gauge who they thought was the best presidential contender to go up against Donald Trump in 2020. And to my surprise, they actually ranked Bernie Sanders as number one, the best suited to go up against Donald Trump in 2020. And the only reservation they expressed about Bernie Sanders' chances was his age. But this is also an issue that would plague Joe Biden, who is their second highest ranked contender and probably Bernie's biggest competition in 2020. Now, this list also includes the likes of Elizabeth Warren, Kamala Harris, and anti-Medicare for All coward and so-called progressive Sherrod Brown, and Wall Street sellout Deval Patrick. But for Democratic Party insiders, this includes members of the party, strategists. For them to rank Bernie Sanders as number one, that's really important because they probably see that the writing is on the wall. Bernie Sanders is the most popular politician in the country, and when you look at all of his policy positions, they have a majority of support from the American people. So I think that's important. Now, keep in mind that they're not implying here that they want Bernie Sanders to win. All that they're stating is that they think Bernie Sanders has the best chance of beating Donald Trump in 2020. So again, this doesn't mean that they're going to rig the primary in favor of Bernie Sanders. I wouldn't want them to do that. I want a fair fight. But this does mean that obviously Bernie Sanders has the best chance of beating Trump. But regardless of who they think is best suited to defeat Donald Trump in 2020, it probably doesn't matter in the end because they'll most likely just try to shove some unpopular neoliberal corporatists down our throats again anyway. But the good news is that Bernie Sanders does seem to be preparing for another presidential run, and he's making a lot of moves that conspicuously point to another run. So according to Gabriele De Benedetti of Politico, he reports that Bernie Sanders is taking steps to address long-standing political shortcomings that were exposed in 2016 ahead of another possible presidential bid in 2020. From forging closer ties to the labor movement to shoring up his once flimsy foreign policy credentials, the moves have provided the senator inroads into party power structures that largely shunned him in favor of Hillary Clinton last year. They've also empowered the progressive icon to harness his newfound political power and help Democrats fight President Donald Trump's administration. Sanders has been working closely with figures who are close to the party establishment he's long railed against, like American Federation of Teachers President Randy Weingarten, and he's been meeting with international affairs experts such as Bill Perry, a defense secretary in the administration of President Bill Clinton, around a series of speeches designed to define his international vision. 1 year after running a campaign heavy on domestic policy and light on the rest of the world. As Sanders monitors his post-2016 political group, Our Revolution, and the Democratic National Committee's reform efforts, he has also slightly expanded his tight circle of 2016 aides. Campaign manager Jeff Weaver has returned to the senator's political payroll after helping build Our Revolution, which still hosts Sanders' campaign email list and provides him a nationwide foothold. To allies on the outer rings of Sanders' political circles, the flurry of moves looks like the beginnings of a full-fledged political operation in contrast to last year's relatively bare-bones organization. Now, this article also explains how he's been meeting with veteran policymakers, and he is visiting really important early primary states like Iowa and New Hampshire, and he's doing a lot of different things to build his national profile, which is all really important. And to prepare in advance is important because even though Bernie Sanders now has the advantage of name recognition, or at least has a comparable level of name recognition to Joe Biden and Elizabeth Warren, we're still going to have an uphill battle on our hands because oligarchs in this country are not going to be so willing to relinquish power and allow Bernie Sanders to win. In fact, when Bernie Sanders started to surge in 2016, we saw people like Michael Bloomberg, a billionaire, threaten to jump in the race as an independent if Bernie Sanders won the nomination in order to basically steal the presidency away from Bernie Sanders and potentially Donald Trump because he was surging at the same time. So I don't want to focus too much on 2020 to the detriment of 2018 because we've got to be prepared to kick ass in 2018, but we've really got to talk about these things and be prepared for anything they might throw at us because we know that the elites in this country are not going to just allow Bernie Sanders to steamroll all of his opponents in 2020 if he is able to do that. I mean, they're going to throw a lot of things at us, and all of these obstacles that they put in front of us, we've got to think about it. We've got to be prepared to address them. So this is really important. And in Bernie Sanders' quest to prepare for 2020, specifically, he has got to make inroads to the African American community. Now, this was not a strength of his in 2016, admittedly, because he came from Vermont, a mostly white state. Now it's the case that when you actually poll people and look at demographics, his biggest group of support comes from African American women, which just so happens to be the most loyal constituent of the Democratic Party. So that's important, but he also really needs to build relationships with African American leaders and civil rights leaders, and he really needs to show that he doesn't just care about them for electoral purposes, that he actually knows about their cause and cares. And I do believe that Bernie Sanders cares, but the point is just proving to them that he really is on their side and is an ally. But again, the extra name recognition that he now has is going to help him with that. Also, he needs to reach out to the gay community, because for whatever reason, everyone who is part of the LGBT community, I mean, the Human Rights Campaign, they all just fell over themselves to endorse Hillary Clinton. You see celebrities that are gay endorse Hillary Clinton, which makes no sense to me, because Bernie Sanders has a history of standing up for LGBT rights, even when it was career suicide and political suicide when he was the mayor of Burlington, Vermont. So these are things that I really want him to work on, and he's got to take a strong stance when it comes to foreign policy. He can't even hint at intervention of any sort. He's got to come out against the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. He needs to unequivocally condemn the drone war, and he needs to take a stand for Palestinian human rights and stop tap dancing around the issue. Now, look, I don't mean to criticize Bernie Sanders here, even though people that we admire should be criticized, because Bernie Sanders is one of the few politicians that is inclined to listen to our criticism. But the point in bringing up these weaknesses is to make Bernie Sanders a stronger candidate. I'm not trying to rake Bernie over the coals and tell you he's a shitty candidate. He's a strong candidate, and he will be in 2020. I do believe that. But if he really is going to win and come out strong, I think these are weaknesses that he should address. But look, the good news is that everyone sees now that the writing is on the wall. Bernie is the number one best choice to beat Donald Trump as of now. And look, he is. It's true. So I'm glad that he's going to run, and this is a good story, So look, let's just keep in mind that 2018 is coming up first, but we've got to prepare for 2020 because, again, we're going to see some shenanigans from the Democratic Party establishment, their donors. We're going to see maybe some DNC fuckery, rigging, and bias. We don't know. We have to prepare, though, in advance, which is why I do think it is important to talk about 2020, even though initially I didn't really want to focus on it too heavily. I do think it's important, though. So, yeah, hopefully he addresses all of these weaknesses and is much stronger in 2020.
Support this podcast by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Humanist Report.